Every Sunday I like to make a big breakfast. 3 stacks of pancakes, sausage, bacon, eggs, hash brown, and a side of toast. Every other day of the week I'll just eat oatmeal. I made me a cup of coffee and sat in my recliner. I didn't recline yet. I pulled up my dinner tray and sat my breakfast on top. Now comes the hard part. Where the hell is the remote? I dug around the corners of the recliner, hoping that I didn't need to stand up. The tray already had me locked in like a roller coaster. Found it. I turned on the morning news. That's the one thing I learned about this city. It's always best to check the news before you leave. There's always some bullshit happening out here. When I turned on the news, Cold Front Carrie was giving her weather report. She was gorgeous. Kind of had that old young thing going on, where the face says 45 but the neck says 63. But regardless, she was a beaut. I finished my breakfast and took the trash out. Luckily, I live on the first floor. It must suck for the people living on the 3rd or 4th, having to drag it all the way down here. I ran into my neighbor, Miss Emily. She actually lived on the 4th floor. She was heading to the garage to grab something out her car. Miss Emily was one of the first neighbors I met when I moved in. Welcomed me to the complex and made me a housewarming apple pie. She asked if I could watch her son Max this evening while she goes to work. She hasn't been able to reach her usual babysitter, Serena. Parents haven't either. She either ran away or, God forbid, passed. I said sure, I'll be over around 4. She thanked me and continued to the garage. When I got back to my apartment, I washed my hands and sat back down in my recliner. I felt the itis starting to creep up. Now it's time to recline. I walked up to Miss Emily's apartment on the 4th floor. I don't think I've ever come up here before. I knocked on the door and she let me in. She was rushing around so much I could barely say hi, Miss Emily. She's a nurse, so I guess I understand. Miss Emily told me Max was in his room reading. Dinner was in the oven, just reheat around 6. Miss Emily said I could crash on the couch or take her room. I said I'll take the couch, but in reality I must sleep in her bed. Miss Emily left. I went to Max's room to check on him. He was lying on his bed reading. I've met Max a few times in the courtyard. He'll usually be skating or sometimes we'll play catch. I let him know I'll be in the living room if he needs anything. He didn't take his eyes off the book, just nodded and gave me a thumbs up. I strolled back to the living room, observing the apartment like any neighbor would. Her kitchen looks bigger than mine, and she has recessed lighting. I guess my floor is the outdated level. I sat on the couch and watched TV. Miss Emily didn't have cable or streaming. All she had was basic channels and the jewelry shopping network. I looked in the drawer on her TV stand. It was filled with VHS tapes. I didn't think people still had these. There was a tape titled Porky. I've seen that movie before. Why not? I popped the tape in the VCR. After some blurry lines, the video got clear. It was Miss Emily getting porked by a pig man. She was kneeling and he was squealing. I'd never seen anything like it. I quickly ejected the tape before Max could see it. What kind of freaky-deaky shit Miss Emily be doing up in here? I went back to the jewelry shopping network. I heard the ice cream truck approaching. I know dinner's in the oven, but I could go for something sweet. And I haven't bought from an ice cream truck in years. I asked Max if he wanted to get some. He said his mom doesn't allow dessert before dinner. I told him it would be our little secret. We walked outside to the truck. Mr. Lamont's old-fashioned ice cream. There was a couple of kids ahead of us. I asked Max what he wanted. He pointed at the rocky road. I used to like that one, but my palate grew a liking for the strawberry shortcake. Been eating it ever since. Mr. Lamont gave us our ice cream cones. I couldn't tell if this shit was waffle or mahogany. I never had a cone so dense before. Anyway, Max and I sat on the curb and enjoyed our treats. I see why old people do this. Just sit on their lawn or porch and watch the neighborhood kids play. It's peaceful. It reminds me of a time when I was young and carefree. There were some kids riding their bikes around a dead cat in the street. I remember doing that back in the day. Unfortunately, one of them ate shit and fell first in the carcass, head all in the guts. They all took off, hopefully to urgent care. By the time Max and I finally finished our cones, the sun finally set. We tossed them in the trash and went inside. I looked in the oven to see what Miss Emily cooked. Homemade lasagna. I warmed it up and made Max and I a plate. We sat at the dining table and ate. I was pigging out so much I forgot to start a courteous conversation. I asked Max if he had seen any movies lately. He said no. He doesn't watch TV that much. Mostly reads or goes outside. A true gem of his generation, in a time where kids would much rather be in a virtual world than a real one. I asked what book he's reading. He said The Bugle. It's about an outcast kid that has a double life as a vigilante. He takes constant bullying and harassment by day and is a mass crusader at night. I asked Max why Bugle Boy doesn't just handle the bullying and harassment if he's able to. Max said bullies are who he targets. The Bugle tracks them down overnight and beats them to a pulp. He's like a god to kids like me. I ran that back in my head. Kids like me. I asked Max if he's getting bullied at school. He said sometimes. He never learned how to fight and can't handle confrontation that well. I really just wanted to say fight back, but I understand that's easier said than done. I told Max maybe next week we'll practice some boxing moves. Maybe throw in some comeback jokes in there too. I checked the time, it was almost 7. If Max is anything like me at 12 years old, there's no way he's falling asleep at 7. I asked him if he plays video games at least. He said yes, but his mom locks away the console during the school week. He wasn't sure where though. I scanned around the living room. Too obvious, she wouldn't hide it there. I went inside Miss Emily's room. I checked under the bed. Nothing there. I opened the closet and saw a cable poking out underneath some clothes. I pulled on it, and continued to pull on it until it stopped. I can tell it was attached to something. I reached in and grabbed the source. Bingo. It was the console. After a few hours and a few ass whoopings, it was time to call it. Max got himself ready for bed, as did I. I put the console back in the closet and tucked it under the clothes. I hopped in Miss Emily's bed, spread eagle, and dozed off to sleep. I was awakened by a cold pull of drool on my pillow. As soon as my cheek hit it, I jolted awake. Fucking gross. Sorry, Miss Emily. Should be dry by the morning. I heard a yell coming from Max's room. I jumped up and ran over. I burst in his door to see what happened. A huge motherfucker had Max tucked under his arm like a football. Ran right in the closet. I chased right behind him. I was running and running, not realizing that I should have hit the back wall of the closet by now. I was somewhere else. A dark tunnel with string lights clinging to the walls. I tried to keep up with whatever that thing is, but its stride was so wide it's impossible. Up ahead it hit a quick right. When I caught up and did the right turn, it was gone. I continued down the path. It was nothing but silence. Where the fuck am I? And what the hell took Max? I kept searching. I didn't even know how to get back to the closet. But I know if I don't return with that kid, I'm probably safer here from Miss Emily. After a few turns, I spotted a light in the distance. I ran towards it. It led to an exit from the cave. Once my eyes adjusted from the darkness, I couldn't believe what I was looking at. A complete totalitarian civilization. But there weren't any adults. Just kids. It was a complete underworld. Above it hung a ceiling of blackness with violet clouds. Below that sky, humanity labored. Kids moved in endless lines, bent low with exhaustion. Their clothing was tattered cloth, offering neither warmth nor identity. Massive rocks were hauled across the ground with crude pulleys and splintered wooden frames. It was Stone Age work. And above it all, at the highest edge of this inverted world, stood a castle. Its towers cut into the violet clouds. From its heights, a silhouette of a man watched. I can tell his presence alone was law. I began exploring around, laying low so I didn't get caught. I caught a few glimpses of kids' faces to see if it was Max, but no luck. I started the direct approach. I went up to kids asking if they saw a kid matching Max's description. Some said no, and some glowed thinking I was their saving grace. Sorry, but I'm here for one kid. Behind me there was a loud smash. I swear every kid's head turned in the same direction like a flock of seagulls. There was a little boy on the ground holding his foot. It was completely twisted backwards. I was about to run over and help, but someone else beat me to it. It looked like a servant or a henchman. They were draped in all black, face covered with a porcelain mask. They bent down next to the boy and observed the foot. Without warning, they twisted it back around. The boy screamed and passed out. The henchman picked up the boy and carried him back in the castle's direction. I think I got a plan, but I'm not gonna like it. About 30 minutes passed. I was just chilling behind a boulder waiting to execute my plan. Although I was in the shade, it was hot as hell in this place. A place I still couldn't figure out. It's so unreal that parts of me wish this was all a lucid dream. I'm still in Miss Emily's bed, Max is in his room sleeping, and I'm gonna wake up and never go to sleep again. But the onset of heat exhaustion tells me otherwise. This is real. I picked up some sand next to me and watched it fall through my fingers. It felt real too. I looked around the boulder. Time to execute. I saw two kids using a pulley to lift a big stone block. There was a third kid standing slightly under the block as a spot. I snuck over to him. I needed something sharp, something that can cut, but there was nothing around. Then just my luck, I saw a scorpion crawling on the ground. I picked it up and dropped it on the end of the rope. It crawled upwards to the two boys pulling the rope. Once they saw it, immediately they let go, dropping the giant stone slab on the third kid. I ran back around the boulder and watched. The kid didn't die, but he probably won't be walking anytime soon. On schedule, the henchman came walking over. He helped the kid break free from the fallen block. While he was assisting the kid, I ran over and put the henchman in a headlock. I choked him as tight as I could until he stopped moving. I pulled off his black fit and put it on, grabbed his mask too. I told all the kids that were now staring at me to act like nothing happened. They all nodded in sync. Weird. I picked up the injured kid and walked to the castle. As I approached the front gate, I could see this guy had a whole army. 2 guards let me in. The whole time I'm thinking I don't have a plan after this. I'm walking with this kid and I don't even know where the medic is. I just acted like I knew where I was going. I saw a young woman standing next to a door smoking. She asked if the boy needed some assistance. I said yes. She beckoned me over. She looked the boy over and shook her head. She observed his legs and said, "That's not good. This kid's DG. Damaged goods." She grabbed him from my arms and carried him inside the infirmary. The door closed. I continued inside the castle. It was dark, very gothic, illuminated by tall wick candles. I must have entered the great hall. There were servants serving and henchmen socializing. I was nervous about blowing my cover. At one point I almost did. I accidentally backed into a servant holding a tray of food, and he dropped it. I knelt down to help him clean it up. He looked so shocked. And then I saw everyone around me look shocked. As if, why is this henchman helping a servant? He should be laughing and taunting him about the dropped food. I wasn't playing the part, and it was noticeable. A henchman approached me and mocked me for my helpful gesture. He called me Phoenix. I guess that's the name of the guy I stole this fit from. He said a few of the other henchmen were going to play Wubula, and I needed to defend my winning title. What the fuck is Wubula? I wanted to tell him no so I could continue looking for Max, but then I remembered. Play the part. I followed Sage back to the henchman corridors. I found out his name is Sage when someone walked by and greeted him. Without that greeting, I would have been screwed on his name. It was a sea of people in black clothes and masks. In the back of the room were henchmen huddled around a table. I'm assuming that's the Wubula. We walked over. It appeared to be a normal game of beer pong. And then I saw one of the players collapse and foam at the mouth. Everybody around started cheering and screaming like it was part of the game. I couldn't ask what was going on. I'm supposed to be defending a winning title. But I'm assuming there's a death cup. The Wubula. They dragged the dead henchman from the table. Without hesitation, I was pushed up as the next opponent. Big Oki was standing there across from me. His little crew was chanting his name. The table got re-racked with new alcohol and a new death cup. I was scared shitless. If I lose, there's no escape in this world. Me or Max. Here we go. I won the eye-to-eye. Balls back. Hey, I'm on a roll. I might make it out of this after all. We were nearing the end of the game. I had 2 cups left, excluding the death cup. Big Okie had 4. The crowd was going nuts. It was my turn to shoot. I flung the ball. It clipped the side of the death cup and bounced off the table. I threw my second ball. Miss. I rolled the balls over to Big Okie. He blew on them and rolled them between his big mutton chop hands. He flung the first ball. Sink. He shot the second ball. It splashed right in the death cup. Big Okie and his crew grew silent. I passed the cup to Big Okie and told him bottoms up. Without hesitation, he knocked it back. Moments later, he collapsed and foamed at the mouth. While he got carried off, the rest of the henchmen cheered my victory over Big Okie. The cheering stopped. It turned into a bunch of ahs and boos. The henchmen began walking out the corridor. Sage hit my shoulder and told me to come on. Odell called a meeting. I followed the group. We entered some sort of council chamber. Through the lancet windows, I could still see the kids working their ass off outside. In the middle of the chamber was a table. We all took our seats around it. A man walked in, cloaked in a velvet purple trench coat, his face hidden behind a mask. He began pacing the room, popping child fingertips in his mouth like sunflower seeds. To be honest, I thought I was going to be able to take him, but after seeing that shit, I don't know. He sat down in the boss chair. You know, the one at the end of the table, overlooking everybody like a lord or some shit. At the snap of a finger, a henchman stood up and hurried away from the table. He returned with the sand clock, probably the size of an antique clock, not the little tiny one. He placed the sand clock on the table beside Odell. The sand wasn't quite running out, but it might in a few hours. Odell snapped his fingers again. The henchman shouted, 6 hours until the lullaby. He picked up the sand clock and scurried away from the table. Odell stood up and walked out. I leaned over to Sage and whispered, we needed a meeting for that? Sage said, of course. This is the big one. The henchmen dispersed from the table. Sage was feeling hungry and asked if I wanted to grab some pottage and rye. I said, no, I'm good. I'm gonna rest for a bit. He gave me a shrug that said, suit yourself, then walked out. I needed to find where Odell went. He couldn't have gone far. I began searching through the halls. A few minutes in, I spotted him. He was walking towards a door guarded by henchmen. It must be his chamber. They let Odell in. Now, how could I get inside? A lone henchman walked up. After a little convo, they let him in too. I guess henchmen have easy access. Nice. Odell walked out, accompanied by the henchmen that entered. They were clearly talking about something. Probably that damn lullaby. Moments later, I walked up to the door. I said Odell forgot his belt. They let me right in. For an evil dictator, Odell's room had a nice scent of strawberries. I looked around his room for any clue where Max is, and what the meaning of this lullaby is. I came across a book with a giant O, but it wasn't just a normal O. It was fancy, designed all nice. No way you're gonna have a book like that and not have the goods in there. I flipped it open. It was very diary-esque. What I did today, what I need more of in my life. There was one page that expressed his love for strawberries, but unable to eat them due to his allergies. Explains the smell. Then I finally hit the page. It had lullaby on top. Everything was written out like a blueprint. Odell planned on abducting every kid in Rottenland. One full sweep in one night. He's going to use some sort of lullaby to lure the kids here. I guess that's easier than snatching them one by one. I needed to get hold of this lullaby, burn it before it begins. The door opened so fast I barely had time to put the shit away. Odell stood there along with his guards. Not much else to say. I was fucked. My legs were beginning to fall asleep. I've been locked in this guillotine for about 10 minutes. Finally, the executioner walked out. I should probably be scared, but I wasn't. The only thing I can think is, what the hell took you so long? He slowly walked closer to me. He had to be a kid. He was shoulder height, barely had his helmet on right. He attached the freshly sharpened blade to the guillotine. That scared shitless feeling was starting to kick in. The executioner looked me square in the face. I closed my eyes. The last thing I want to see is myself getting killed. I'd rather look at the back of my eyelids. Suddenly, I heard a voice say my name. My eyes opened. Max? The executioner nodded. There's no way. I can't believe I'm about to get my head cut off by Max. I can't believe I found Max. The crowd began cheering. I need to figure something out quick. I looked to my right. There's a stack of hay, probably for someone to use as a freak seat. I mean, come on. You gotta love executions if you're sitting that close. I whispered to Max to pop the locks off my wrists. I had an idea. While still holding the guillotine rope, Max discreetly popped the locks off. I slid out of my restraints and grabbed a torch lamp on stage. I lit the hay on fire and threw it at the crowd. They parted like the Red Sea. Max and I ran through the open path, sprinting away from the castle. Arrows were whizzing by us. The kids outside working were cheering us on. We kept going. Eventually reaching the cave I left. I know we weren't home, but having Max back felt good already. It's been about 15 minutes of us roaming around the caves. I thought I could find the entrance back to the closet, but I couldn't. I can tell Max was getting anxious and worried. We sat down and took a break. I had no idea what time it was or what location. Hell, I didn't even know if we're on Earth anymore. Miss Emily could be heading home right now. Notices Max and I gone, tries to call my cell, but it's still on her nightstand. Then she freaks out. She freaks the fuck out. I heard some footsteps approaching. Max and I stood up and hid behind a corner. Might be one of those damn henchmen. The shadow was getting closer. I peeked around to see who it was. It was a teen. She was grabbing stuff off the ground. I said, "Excuse me." She got startled and dropped the rocks in her hand. I assured her I wasn't a henchman. But when she saw Max, her eyes beamed with happiness. She ran over and gave him the tightest hug. I must have missed something. After their embrace, Max said, "This is Serena, my babysitter." We followed Serena through the caves. She was telling us how she ended up in this shithole. It was during a sleepover with her friend. Similar to Max, someone snatched her and the friend up, brought them here. Wherever we were going started to incline. It got steeper and steeper. Then eventually we crawled up into a new world. It was like a jungle. Everything was green and full of nature. I was so caught up in the landscape, Max and Serena were far ahead. I had to catch up. We arrived at some sort of commune. Real eerie place, like walking on Spawn Ranch. Everyone's eyes were glued on us, especially me. I was still in my henchman gear. Serena asked if we were hungry. I said yeah. The last thing we ate was that lasagna. She brought us to the eating area. There was different kinds of fruits and veggies. It appeared spaghetti was today's main course. Max and I loaded up our plates with spaghetti. I also bagged up some strawberries and put them in my pocket. Serena informed us Roxana will be meeting with us shortly, then walked off. While I was pigging out, I heard heavy footsteps approaching. I looked over because I thought it was Roxana. But no, it was some big burly kid walking over. Had to be 17. He approached my table, spat in my food, and followed it with, "Henchmen don't belong here." Very badly, I wanted to shove my plate in his face and slam his head on the table. But I couldn't. I needed to make a good impression. I simply pushed the plate away and said, "Understood." Max was kind enough to share his food with me. Moments later, a young woman approached our table. She said, "My name's Roxana, leader of the rebellion." One by one, we all escaped Odell, made our way here and turned it into a home. I could see all the battle scars in Roxana. That escape must have been hell. I asked her who exactly is Odell. She said Odell was the child of the boogeyman, killed his father and mother, took the role of the boogeyman, and turned this realm into some dystopian hell. The real boogeyman scared kids into making them right. Odell snatches kids for slave work. Roxana was dropping a lot on me, but I felt like it was also a good time to tell her about the lullaby. She was shocked, but at the same time relieved. Roxana said our arrival was perfect then. The rebellion was planning on raiding Odell's castle in 2 days, leaving Max and I only 1 day to train. I told Roxana Max and I couldn't participate in the raid. We just needed to find a way home. Roxana looked at me and laughed. Don't you think we all want to go home? Either you can fight with us to make that happen, or you sit back and lessen the chances. Guess we're going to war, Max. The next day, Max and I arrived at the training camp. It seemed the battle stations were separated by ages. Younger kids were working on shield fighting and techniques. That's where Max was led. Older kids were sword training and practicing against each other. That's where I went. I know we're training for Oblivion, but it's nice to see Max getting the defensive training he needed. There was a couple times I looked over and he was taking hits, but he caught on though. Those techniques were slowly developing. I was next up to battle my opponent. It was Mr. Food Spitter. His big ass stood front and center. I couldn't wait to go against him. I walked up. He eyed me up and down. Had a little shit-eating grin on his face. The instructor did a countdown, then we started. I charged right at him. He wasn't ready. Fell backwards on his ass. I tossed the sword and began punching him in the face. Kept calling him corn-fed Carl while I was doing it. Eventually the instructor jumped in and broke it up. But man, that payback felt good. I didn't know what the hell was going on. I scanned around but didn't see Max. There were about 15 henchmen walking through the commune causing havoc. They destroyed the eating area, our tents, even took some of the weapons. Leading the pack was Sage. I ducked my head so he didn't get a clear view of me. He pulled out some device. It was leading him to the trash. Inside, he pulled out the henchman suit I was wearing. Shit, I didn't know they could bug those things. Dash, you impersonated my friend and discovered secrets you shouldn't know. Either return for your execution, or we'll be back and destroy everything until air is your only ceiling. I looked at all the scared faces around me, terrified of losing the one place they called home in a long time. I rose out of my hiding spot and walked to Sage. He tied ropes around my wrist and walked me back in the cave. Sage entered the room with the brazen bull, wheeled it in with the help of a few other henchmen. Shit must be fresh off the fire. I could feel the heat radiating off his nuts. Sage said, per Odell's orders, no guillotine will be used. An enclosed execution is necessary to reduce chances of escaping. I pleaded with Sage that I won't escape. I'll take a guillotine, a hanging, just don't cook me. I can only imagine the feeling, like that hot metal slide at the park, burning the hell out of your arms and legs when you go down. But instead, it's all over. Sage said there's nothing he can do. The henchman lowered the hatch. I ain't getting in that shit. Phoenix snatched me by my arm and dragged me to the bull. I was trying my hardest to pull back. My face was getting hotter and hotter the closer I got. The henchman ducked with fear. Phoenix threw me to the ground. The henchmen rushed out the door. They shut it, but they didn't lock it. I crept out the room into the hall. There wasn't any activity where I was, but I could hear the chaos in other wings of the castle. I made my way down the hall. It's happening. The rebellion must have initiated the attack early. Perhaps to save me. That's sweet. I heard people jogging towards my direction. I ran in the door across from me. It was dark inside and smelled like decomposition. I assumed I walked into the garbage room. I turned on a lamp. The room was filled with dead henchmen. I saw Big Oki's body on the ground. This must be where they discard the Wubula bodies. I stole a henchman's suit from one of the corpses. I put it on and walked out. Immediately I ran into Serena. She drew her sword ready to slash. I lifted my mask and told her it's Dash. I'm wearing the suit to move behind enemy lines. She put her sword away. There was a henchman bleeding out nearby. I rubbed my hand in their blood and smeared it over my left shoulder, all over the armor. I told Serena to inform the rebellion the henchman with the red shoulder is Dash. She said okay. I picked up the dead henchman's sword and went looking for Odell. I ran to the other side of the castle to Odell's chamber. I figured he'd be in there. When I got to the doors, the guards were dead on the floor, and the door was cracked open. I peeked inside. There were 2 kids from the rebellion, also deceased on the floor. I drew my sword and entered inside. It was quiet. Maybe he's not in here. Suddenly, I felt my body seize up. I couldn't move any of my muscles. Odell appeared from behind a corner. The intensity in his eyes tells me he's the one controlling the body paralysis. Once he saw it was a henchman, he let go. He told me to shut the door and lock it. I did just that. Odell asked if I wanted a drink. I was going to say no, but then I remembered. Play the part. I took the drink. He said it was Moonshadow Panther blood. Their blood contains high alcohol levels, like moonshine times 10. Odell walked over to his window and looked down at the chaos erupting outside. He laughed, like it was entertainment. He called me over to watch. I didn't want to witness the brutality, but I guess I had to. We looked upon the destruction below. Odell's face was glowing like a kid in a toy store, sickening to see. Since we were in a private setting, and Odell had a little liquor in him, I decided to ask what caused all this. Killing his parents, changing the boogie system. Odell poured another glass of Moonshadow Panther. He explained him and his father never saw eye to eye. The boogeyman believed in using his power to scare kids into being decent. Odell found that ridiculous, a poor use of their full potential. What Odell wanted was tyranny, and he got it. No rhyme, no reason, just an evil child with a craving for control. But who could blame him? He was born to be feared. It's only natural to become a fearmonger by nature. He went on to explain the death of his parents wasn't caused by him. Odell pointed to a spot on the ground. He said that's where his parents' jacuzzi-style tub used to be. During an intimate bath, the radio slid in the tub and fried them both. Last thing you want to do is find your parents like that. For the first time, I was seeing the vulnerable side of Odell. He took another sip of his drink and sat it down. He told me he popped the seal and headed to the bathroom. Watch the door, he said. Once Odell was out of the room, I pulled out the baggie of strawberries. I took a couple and squeezed it in his drink. I wiped my hands on the side of the couch and sat back casually. Odell returned and asked if I wanted to listen to some music. Sure. He walked over to his vinyl player and put on a record. What kind of shit is this? Odell began dancing. I just sat back and watched. Eventually his waltz brought him back to the table. He picked up his drink and downed the rest. He continued to dance, but then it got slower and slower and slower. Then he collapsed. Immediately, I did a full sweep of his chamber. Every now and then I peeked over just to make sure he was still out. He was just lying there like a damn rag doll. I searched high and low but still couldn't find the lullaby. Flipped through his bookshelf, scattered every record in his vinyl cabinet, even checked under his mattress. Then it hit me. What if the lullaby was never written? It was just memorized. Before I could turn my neck to look at Odell, 300 pounds of fur landed on top of me, crashing me through the floorboards and submerging me in some body of water. I couldn't see shit. The water was all murky black and smelled like decay. When I finally brought myself to my feet, I realized I was standing in a jacuzzi tub. The bodies of the boogeyman and his wife were floating around me. Odell never got rid of the bodies. He just built over them. I grabbed the floorboards to lift myself out. 5-inch nails clawed me in the face, sending me back into the water. Odell was changing before my eyes into some sadistic behemoth beast. Odell pounced on top of me. My body sank like in anger. Once again, I was underneath the black mess. His weight was too heavy to push off. I reached around and felt a bone. I grabbed it and stabbed it in Odell's furry balls, but it did nothing, just made him more pissed. Odell ripped off my armor. I was naked. Not butt-ass naked, but I had no cover. He elongated his neck and tilted his head back, like a piece of Pez was going to shoot out his throat. He dropped his head and began consuming me like a snake. His drool raced down the corner of my face, his tongue licking the top of my skull. I don't envy anyone who dies this way. Suddenly, I felt Odell's mouth retract from my head. I don't know what made him change his mind. Maybe it was the rotten carcass sauce I was marinating in. I wiped the slobber and spit out my eyes and looked up. Like a god, Max was standing there over the floorboards. One hand holding a sword, the other holding Odell's head. I couldn't believe it. I lifted myself out of the grave pit. I knew I smelled like shit, but I gave Max a hug anyway. He told me most of the henchmen were dead. The rebellion had a few casualties too. But overall, we won this battle. Max and I walked over to the window. He lifted up Odell's head and raised it out. The rebellion cheered below. I saw Roxana down there, Serena, even corn-fed Carl. I'm glad they all survived. I told Max you did it. You freed hundreds of enslaved children and defeated the biggest bully of them all, the boogeyman. You're a changed kid. Remember that the next time a kid tries to pick on you. He said, I will, Dash. Thanks. One by one, kids were disappearing, returning back to their homes. Max sat down the sword in Odell's head. I grabbed his hand. You ready? Max nodded. Max and I walked out his closet. It's a weird transition from that chaos to the subtleties of the twilight hours. Everything was quiet, undisturbed, like we never left. The clock on Max's nightstand read 4:30 a.m. 2 days in that place only took roughly 8 hours. There was still one more order of business. Max and I were covered in filth, especially me. He jumped in his shower. I went to my apartment and jumped in mine. When I returned to Miss Emily's apartment, Max was asleep in his bed. Perfect. Everything was back to normal. I crawled into Miss Emily's bed, spread eagle, and knocked out. The next morning, I felt a tap on my back. It was Miss Emily waking me up. She asked me how the night went. I said smooth. Max was easy to watch. She smiled and said good. She also informed me Max's babysitter, Serena, finally got back to her, so she'll be returning to her babysitting duties. Miss Emily paid me for my services, and I left. When I stepped out the front door, I was overwhelmed with joy. Just looking out into the sunrise, seeing the city, seeing life, not that dystopian hell I just came from. Sometimes you dismiss the simple beauties like a good morning because it becomes normal. But you gotta appreciate it. It could change in an instant. I might actually go for a bike ride this morning. But first things first, gotta make my oatmeal.